the fun part of the movie was going to be a heist movie, but at the heart of the movie was going to be an everyman story about losing the affection of their child, and so here we have this loser, but who is an everyman, a likable enough person, of course, in Paul Rudd. But that's where we started with that.
We had to sort of figure out a language by which you could actually shoot this, and we had all sorts of scale as the kind of thing we were really up against. How do you make this little guy look little, feel little, in this world? And I know Jake had done tons of research and development on how actually to shoot it, and it became a little counterintuitive that you couldn't use our typical power angles to shoot him. If you use those, the ones below that make them look heroic, the net result was you would ruin the scale effect. So we had a lot to figure out.
It actually had this weird knock-on effect where if you shot him from below, looking up, it made it look like an incredible rear projection experience from the 50s. It really looked like a guy who was like running behind with the car behind him and all the rest of it. So yeah, we made sure that we always shot down on him. We boomed the camera up and always shot down, and we tried to frame him so you would see head to toe all the time. And I think that always helps to sort of show, his diminished scale. We also, like, over the course of the production, got better, I think, at not being afraid to just pull the camera back a little bit and see less of him, because frankly he is Ant-Man, so smaller is better.
Yeah, I also think that before we started production on Ant-Man, we saw Guardians of the Galaxy, and I just went into, shock, because I said, this is never going to be as big as Guardians of the Galaxy, and what are we going to do? How's it going to look? Because we were working instead of galaxies, we were working in bedrooms and bathrooms, and it was, what do you do to make something that's so common, a place that we all know look exciting, and be a place where adventure can happen? And so we all had a dialogue about, how the sets would be built, how the camera would be staged, there'd be certain rules the camera moved, and also and I think is very clever that Jake said, this guy moves so fast, we should just shoot it, even though we'll eventually be working with motion control photography. Let's shoot it as though it's handheld and he zips out of the frame and we can barely follow him. And so you see some of that stuff where he first falls on the floor of the bathtub and then goes over through the crack down into the raver's room, that the camera misses him and finds him again. And there were all those things that we would do to kind of feel like we were actually photographing a real event and not a smoothly choreographed special effects movie. We ended up
sort of having our own little terminology in post-production that we called one particular thing the gift that keeps giving, and that's going to the wide of the real world and with him as a tiny ant, because if you just save that like for the punches, punchline kind of stuff, it always worked and it was always fun. So you'd be with him and then all of a sudden, wham, you see, the set with the little guy, and you're like, oh, that's
Which
cool.
I think the touchstone for that one is the in the little girl's bedroom.
The train.
At the end, in the train fight, is really the one where, you're in the middle of this, hopefully this huge sort of Tony Scott epic, train battle, and then there's that moment where you just go and pop back and just drops.
Yeah, in fact, one fun thing that we were thinking about in pre-production is, as we were thinking about things that, like the train fight on the train, I remember going to the Pantages or something on Hollywood Boulevard back in the another era, be two ice ages ago, to see like how the West was won, and I just loved the camera work on that. I love the camera with those exciting westerns and train robbery films, and so we thought, well, let's invest this little sequence between these two ant-sized characters with all those angles and all that feeling of fun and energy that we could, and then of course we just cut to what it really is, that one shot, and we had a lot of fun.
And speaking of the train sequence, I mean, after every environment that was designed and every set that was created, it was then also like, all right, now we have to design the real set, which is the macro set. So the train table and how high it was off the ground and where it sat in the room and what was around. And after that was designed, and we had so many meetings about it and rates of speed of trains, et cetera, then became, well, this is where it's sitting in the room. And then I had to design we had to design the matte painting for that train, which is the backdrop, like what was on the walls. And one of the themes of the greatest train fights ever kind of came up when we started doing murals, as if Cassie had drawn cactuses and landscapes and Arizona, and just where you would see these great John Ford epic films with the best train fights ever.
Now, Shepherd, when you were designing the film, did you ever go to the actual Ant-Man comics for inspiration?
Yes, so there's always a reference point, and you almost want to over-reference things and talk about them and how it relates to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And the reason to do that is because inevitably there'll be an interest in neutering that. So it's like, hey, but if you forget it and don't ever reference it, then it's like, why the hell didn't we talk about this? So it was definitely like, hey, maybe we can name that the Kirby Hotel. Hey, maybe we can name this or that. But one of the key props that we decided to integrate, almost as an identical match was in Ant-Man. I forgot what episode, but basically there's Kirby had designed this ant farm, and you see it, you come right off of it when you go into the secure room in Pym's basement. And it's basically this kind of bullet-shaped thing with a purple top and an ant farm, and ants are on it, and Russell came right off of it to go to Paul. And it is literally, it's an identical match. And one of the inspirations, obviously, this film takes place, it takes place over, a couple of weeks, but it basically takes place over decades as well, because we are showing the history of Hank Pym, who he was in 1989 and before, and you needed to show not just the words of the Pym particles, but the environment in which it was created in. And that was the real kind of place to show a little bit of the history, which we were able to integrate, Jack Kirby kind of inspired stuff from Ant-Man comics.